Ruthless retaliation. What gains are you referring to? I can give them up straight away. There was a glint in Celine's eyes. This is your final chance. If this happened before the joint conference, I might have given it a thought, but now. Gus shook his head and said, there is no further need for you to stall for time. There has been no Magus who has ever been able to survive after being hit by my fog giant's self-detonation. Even if Leyland manages to survive the blow, he's probably incapacitated, unable to move a single muscle. Celine felt complete despair as her last hope was shattered. Get on with it. She closed her eyes and exposed her pale neck. Where is Skrill? Gus asked at the end while he formed a ball of distortion filled with destructive energy. I have no idea. Leyland personally carried out the interrogation. Then you are no longer of use. The indifferent Gus released the ball of distortion in his hands. Pooh. A layer of a black, scaly shield appeared out of nowhere in front of Celine, and it managed to block the explosion from the attack. After the smoke dissipated, a black-robed Magus had already appeared in front of Celine. Leyland! Gus' eyes widened in fear as he fearfully uttered the name. Tell me. How do you guys want to die? The corners of Leyland's lips curled into a vibrant smile. Do it! Gus' face flushed red as he shouted. Double the amount. Bear in mind that it is double the amount. The old man with a hawk nose beside him released large amounts of elemental rings, forming a brass ring with mysterious runes on the surface. While executing this attack, he did not forget to turn back and remind Gus about his remuneration. Gray mist started to form immediately, and the fog giant from their previous encounter appeared once again. Unlike the last time, rays of light which resembled starlight started to emerge from every Magus who was present and connected to the body of the giant, making the giant's aura rise to a frightening level. The brass ring was thrown around the waist of the giant, and it strapped tightly around it in that instant. Roar! The giant let out a devastating roar. While its lower body was shrinking non-stop, the mist on its upper body started to aggregate once again, and formed a body of muscle with a toughness that was as strong as granite. A combination spell. Celine, who was behind Leyland, couldn't help but to let out a sound at the sight. Even her breathing began to get rough. The opposing side has 2 peak rank 1 magi, along with 10 or so magi elders. Meanwhile, Leyland. Celine had no time to process the thoughts in her head before her jaw dropped at the sight. Silver. A faint sliver of light started to appear on Leyland's body. At this moment, even the air seemed to be frozen. An oppressive pressure could be felt descending onto the battlefield. Materialized spiritual force, a rank 2 Magus. The hawk-nosed old man made a strange sound. Despite bleeding profusely from his mouth and nose, the old man started to recall his spells, risking recoil in doing so while he retreated in haste. It was a pity that this was all too late. A pillar of silver light streaked across the sky and arrived at the top of the old man's head. No. The old man exclaimed in anger, and an incomplete protection rune on his neck exploded, resulting in an inferno of crimson flames. Following that, the old man stopped in his tracks for a moment and nearly fell to the ground. He had obviously felt the peak elemental spiritual force, residing in the flames being instantly destroyed by the silver materialized spiritual force when the two forces collided. As the spiritual force being manipulated was dispelled, the inferno of crimson flames lost sight of its target and began spreading to the surroundings. The silver spiritual force soon descended down on its target. It formed a silver cross-shaped sword after having elongated and pierced the old man in the chest. Drip, drip. The old man was bleeding profusely, and droplets of blood could be seen dripping onto the ground. He tried humming, but no energy particles were triggered. The solidified spiritual force of a rank 2 Magus far surpassed the spiritual force of an converted Magus in terms of quality. The spiritual force residing inside the old man's consciousness was no match for the silver spiritual force, and was completely locked down with a single hit. This rationale was very similar to what had happened to Leyland when he had been confined by the Gargimmel on the mountain of white bones. After Leyland had completely recovered his rank 2 Magus power, even a peak rank 1 Magus was nothing more than a slightly stronger ant in Leyland's eyes. He. The sight had the Magi from the dense fog forest at a loss. With just one single blow, the peak rank 1 Magus was on the verge of death. They had only heard of this kind of terrifying power in legends. Gus' face started to turn pale from despair before it finally became a grim roar. Under his manipulation, the gigantic fog giant ferociously charged in Leyland's direction. Leyland started to slowly open an ancient scroll in his hands, which was radiating with destructive energy that could be felt in the surroundings. Scorching touch. A bunch of red powder started to spill out, and 2 long and narrow energy beams, which carried the destructive force of a rank 2 spell, shot out from Leyland's hands. The fog giant was immediately scorched, and 2 large holes were created from the attack. Boom. A large amount of the mist started to dissipate, and all the Magi who were connected to the mist giant started to collapse to the ground. In the blink of an eye, Leyland appeared in front of Gus. Zoom, 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 zoom. While he was moving, several snow-white ice arrows were abruptly shot out. Zoom, zoom. Zoom, zoom. Confronted with the might of the arrows, the innate defensive spell formations of rank 1 Magi were shredded easily like pieces of paper. The heads of numerous Magi exploded, similar to watermelons exploding. At the sight of this unbearable scenario, even Gus, who was preparing a spell, could not help but feel anger and a sense of despair. The number of rank 1 Magi that had died constituted almost half of the dense fog forest's forces. All his efforts to accumulate this power all these years had gone down the drain as he lost 70 to 80% of his forces. But at this moment, Gus had no time to think about this as Leyland arrived in front of him. Protection of Andes. Gus shouted loudly, and a colony of black ants emerged from his face, clothes, shoes, and all over his body and formed a peculiar-looking black shield. A futile effort. Leyland looked indifferent and raised his right hand. A layer of black rays started to gather around his palm and formed a bunch of black scales. Chemoyan's scale. Partial snake transformation. Poe. Leyland's palms were filled with an enormous amount of energy which penetrated the shield. The colony of ants on the shield let out a shrill sound as they tried to gnaw at the black scales, but it was to no avail. Your last resort is just a scroll engraved by a rank 2 Magus. How disappointing. The silver ray of light in Leyland's eyes started to shine brightly, and with his right hand, he grabbed Gus' wrist. Pack. The scroll, which was already triggered halfway, suddenly lost all its luster and revealed its true appearance of what seemed to be a broken piece of goatskin paper as it fell to the ground. Do you have any last words? Leyland asked Gus as he sealed his spiritual force. You will be punished by the joint conference. I swear on that. Gus' eyes turned red. Pack, after which his brain exploded, white brain juices, blood, and fluids spurting everywhere. Just this, how pointless. Leyland retracted his right hand. He appeared in front of the hawk-nosed old man and placed his hands on the head of an old man who was on the verge of death. Do you choose death or subservience? The old man, who was bleeding profusely and nearing death, struggled to open his mouth. I'm willing to be subservient to you, my lord. Set a pact now and surrender a strand of your spirit source, or else you will end up like the others. The tone of Leyland's voice was very indifferent, and the pile of corpses surrounding him made the old man have no thoughts of defying the order. I, Iron, am willing to serve under your command and become your most humble servant. Your future commands shall be my eternal mission. Even with his eyes blurred with tears, the old man still struggled to speak. A fluctuating thread from the abyss was established between the two. Very good. Leyland recalled the silver spiritual force that was restricting the old man. My lord. Iron kneeled down to give his regards, the wounds on his body already beginning to heal on their own. He had been restricted by Leyland and lost his ability to recover. Once he was freed from the silver spiritual force that was restricting him, there were far too many ways for Magi to heal themselves. Please accept your humble servant's loyalty. Although he had regained his freedom, the old man Iron had no desire to fight against Leyland, as he had been deterred by Leyland's actions. With Iron's words, a glowing spirit source floated out of his forehead and flew to Leyland's hands. After losing his spiritual source, Iron's face turned pale, and beads of sweat could be seen dripping down. Leyland, for his part, kept the spirit source carefully. A Magus spirit source was very important to them, and if Leyland were to destroy the source in his hands, the old man would suffer a severe blow and might even die straight away. The best-case scenario would be for him to have a mental breakdown. It could be said that once Leyland had the spirit source, it was akin to him holding the old man's fate in his hands. All good and done, Leyland clapped his hands. This kind of one-sided process and astonishing means from Leyland had made it difficult for Celine to process anything. My lord, you! Celine had no idea of what to say. Have you ascended to rank 2? She said this carefully after deliberating over it for a while. Yes. Leyland happily smiled. The injury I suffered has, instead, made me break through the restraints to my meditation technique and allowed me to rise to the realm of rank 2. Celine did not have the courage to continue probing, despite knowing it was not the truth. A rank 2 Magus. This was already a power that belonged to large-scale guilds. Facing this insurmountable gap in power, Celine could only accept whatever Leyland had to say. Wake those acolytes up and follow me. Leyland pointed to a few of the acolytes who were lying on the ground that included Obo and Ilya. Shem, what for? Celine's face was filled with doubts. Naturally, it will be to retaliate. Leyland's face broke into a cold smile. Since the opposing party has been so eager to find us, how can we not repay what they have done? But the joint conference. Celine had only spoken a few words, but she decided to swallow the rest. At this moment, she had no other choice. Abyssal breath, my lord. That's the dense fog forest's headquarters. Old man Iron pointed to a fog-shrouded forest in the middle of the basin, with a look of respect on his face. Currently, Iron was completely submissive to Leyland and existed as his servant. Leyland walked behind him with conflicted feelings. Together with Obo, Ilya, and the other rank 3 acolytes, their faces were red with emotions. Rank 2 Magus. Their famed professor was actually a rank 2 noble Magus, who actually defeated a lot of enemies with just one blow. They were proud of this kind of glory. The dense fog forest is still a medium-scale guild, with an extremely strong Magi formation barrier. With several protected and contracted beings as the first line of defense, does this not mean that we are? Iron had revealed all of Gus' defensive lines backhandedly. We do not need anything. I alone am sufficient. All of you keep in mind, without my orders, no one is allowed to step into the basin. Leyland's face was stern. After which, he transformed into a gust of wind and disappeared in midair. A sound could be heard as he traveled. Celine and the rest saw an illusory shadow of a snake appearing in midair. The huge snake forcefully appeared and seemed to transform into the face of a terrifying devil. The shape of the devil's face seemed to resemble Leyland. After half an hour passed, they had obtained permission to enter the dense fog forest, and they saw huge amounts of rotten corpses. A few huge high-energy beings, whose size resembled small mountains, could also be seen dead on the floor. Their corpses, not yet fully decomposed, had emitted an unpleasant smell. Your task is to completely search this area and take away any resources that are of value. Leyland slowly landed on the corpse of a huge beast. That scene had made many absolutely horrified. Yes, Yes, my lord. Initially, Celine had doubts over why Leyland had wanted to bring a batch of acolytes over. However, now she fully understood his intentions. After having searched the dense fog forest, Leyland had arrived near the premises of the headquarters of the Eight-Clawed Spider Guild. This time around, Skrill appeared beside him. If Leyland could subdue even iron, naturally Skrill was not a big issue. Go. Announce that the Eight-Clawed Spider will be disbanded, and that all the Magi shall join Nature's alliance, Leyland ordered Skrill. As you wish, my lord. Skrill bowed to Leyland, evidently afraid of him. His fear was to the extent that he was willing to accept such orders. With regards to the subsidiary guilds of the dense fog forest, Leyland did not intend to exterminate all of them fully. In any case, since they had no chance of knowing the icy world's secret, it would be for the best to subdue all of them to increase Nature's alliance's strength. Furthermore, all of the dense fog forest Magi had been exterminated without any exceptions under Leyland's rank 2 Magi spell that covered a vast area. There was no longer any living beings within the entire basin. It could be said that the dense fog forest guild had disappeared from the face of the earth. Looking at the uproar from the guild headquarters, together with Iron and the people that went forth to subdue them, Leyland smiled icily. Next, perhaps it's time for the rank 2 Magi. How long had it been since such a large-scale attack, and such a vile way of exterminating an entire guild, had happened in the entire eastern Twilight Zone? No matter how dim-witted the large-scale guilds were, they would have to make a stand. Moreover, according to the latest news, the Dark Elven Empire was starting to become restless. And it was also nearing the time when the darkness creature horde beyond the Twilight Zone was approaching. It was precisely during this period of time where Magi were supposed to collaborate that Nature's alliance's move could be said to be going against the tide. So what? Leyland's face revealed a smile that seemed to suggest that he did not care. It is precisely because of this that I am making a move now. The combining of forces to deal with external forces not only restricts the Nature's alliance, but all the other large-scale guilds as well. Would they be willing to, under these conditions, lose a rank 2 Magus? How can the strength associated with a medium-scale guild measure up to a newly promoted rank 2 Magus? Furthermore, we still possess sufficient evidence to prove that the dense fog forest had started the fight first, and had even encroached into our headquarters and caused a large number of casualties. With strength and evidence, even large-scale guilds would not act recklessly. With regards to this, Leyland understood the logic very clearly. After 10 minutes or so, Skrill and Iron returned. My lord, the Eight-Clawed Spider Guild has officially disbanded. This is our high-grade meditation technique, Abyssal Breath. Skrill respectfully half-knelt and passed a black crystal wand to Leyland. Well done. Leyland took the wand gently, with a thread of his silver spiritual force reaching into it. Increasing the power of Nature's alliance was only part of the reason why Leyland had destroyed the guilds. The main objective behind his actions was actually to collect the high-grade meditation techniques. As time passed, Leyland frowned, which caused Skrill to start trembling. Only rank 3, Leyland sighed. The Eight-Clawed Spider Guild's meditation technique had the same flaws as Celine's crystal mask. Not only was it hard to develop, it was only rank 3. This implied that the Magi from the Eight-Clawed Spider Guild could at most be promoted to rank 3 and not beyond. I, your subordinate, am ashamed. Our high-grade meditation technique does only have 3 levels. Personally, I have been stuck at rank 1 and can only use the irrigation of the abyss strength. Skrill lowered his head and quickly explained. Of course, I know. Leyland knew that this abyssal breath mostly used the strength of the abyss to continuously change the body to adjust to a physical state more fitting to the abyss. Skrill's half-human, half-spider appearance was the way it was due to the imitation of a special being from the abyss, and this is merely rank 1 of the abyssal breath. according to the introduction of the meditation technique and the AI. Chap's deductions, if one were to promote the meditation technique to its highest level, one would be able to return to their original state and have the physical appearance of a normal person. Only then would the Magus, who had been entirely transformed by the abyss, be known as the spawn of the abyss. But of course, these were only deductions made by the AI. Chap, according to Leyland's estimations, to reach the state of the abyss spawn, one would have to develop the abyssal breath higher than rank 5. Honestly, one could not be sure whether the high-grade meditation technique even had a rank 5. However, after all, this is a high-grade meditation technique and is a grade higher than the crystal mask. This can improve the AI. Chap's meditation technique's information database. Leyland kept the black crystal wand. Because many ancient magi were passionate about researching about all living beings in the world. They looked for patterns, obtained strength, and frequently interacted with beings of different realms. Hence, many ancient meditation techniques had a strong and strange aura. With respect to the abyssal breath, Leyland estimated that it had a deep relationship with the abyssal world, and could even have been released by a strong and powerful being living within the abyss. Dense Fog Forest has other auxiliary guilds, namely 3 other small-scale guilds and 15 unrated guilds. All of you shall break into 3 groups. Iron and Skrill will lead 2 groups to sweep the unrated guilds, while I will be in charge of the small-scale guilds. Leyland immediately gave out his orders. As you wish, my lord. The surrounding magi all bowed with respect. Leyland nodded. Iron was a peak rank 1 Magus, and Skrill was a semi-converted elemental Magus. To put them in charge to deal with the unrated guilds was a terrifying force to be reckoned with. The unrated guilds did not stand a chance with the teams led by the 2 of them. Furthermore, upon performing this deed, these newly subdued magi would have no way out and would only be able to come under Leyland's wings. Several days later, explosive news spread across the entire eastern Twilight Zone that caused a sensation in the Magi world, and even continued to spread in the 4 other zones. After having existed for a few 100,000 years, large amounts of contracted guardian beasts, countless official Magi, and even a peak rank 1 Magus that oversaw a medium-scale guild, the dense fog forest, were entirely destroyed. The one responsible for it was actually Nature's Alliance. This news had revealed that the honorary professor of Nature's Alliance had made a breakthrough to rank 2. A peak rank 1 Magus was considered as a large power, while a rank 2 Magus was the goal of many official Magi, which were also known as the elites of the human forces. Typically, a rank 2 Magi would only appear in large-scale guilds. The presence of the 1 or 2 old and experienced rank 2 Magi was that of the trump card of these guilds. Nature's Alliance, on the other hand, was only a small-scale guild. At this point in time, the entire eastern Twilight Zone was shocked. Under Leyland's control, the actions of Nature's Alliance went extremely smoothly. Not only did Nature's Alliance attack all of the dense fog forest's auxiliary guilds and wiped out all traces of its history. Many Magi had joined Nature's Alliance and enhanced its strength, such that it had been promoted to a medium-scale guild. These were all within Leyland's expectations. Moreover, the taking over of the dense fog forest's resources was also proceeding smoothly. This, of course, was not in accordance with the rules set by the council members and had sparked their displeasure. However, under Leyland's suppression, Nature's Alliance continued doing whatever they wanted to without any hesitation. The guilds sent out many troops, and their strength increased day after day. With regards to small matters like the strength of the guild, Leyland could not be bothered to oversee them and would casually instruct his acolytes to handle them. The newly joined Magi that were now part of Nature's Alliance were all given roles as professors or guest professors. But in actual fact, they would only listen to Leyland's bidding. Celine's powers were suppressed to the maximum, but she could only force a smile and could not complain much. Leyland had suddenly been promoted to a rank 2 magi, and just his strength alone would make Celine's previous plans prove futile. Furthermore, in terms of trickery, back in the southern coast, the underhanded means that Leyland had employed did not pale in comparison to that Celine's. Under these conditions, Celine could only give up. Due to her special status, other official magi would still be slightly respectful towards her and would not reject her requests towards small matters. Furthermore, these magi were still under nature's alliance, even if only in name, which gave Celine some comfort. Dragon King's mystic Might Nature's Alliance headquarters. The headquarters had now undergone renovations. The reconstruction had started from the bottom, with magic spells fixed up and the acolytes who had died in battle buried. Powerful energy fluctuations were concealed within these few building structures. They were like multiple stars aiming to bring out the moon, crowding around a laboratory right in the center. Whether it was the original acolytes of Nature's Alliance or the newly joined magi, they would always unconsciously slow their footsteps when they passed by and exhibit their respect. In the middle of the laboratory, Leyland stood by a table, deep in thought while gazing at the few items on the silver desk. These 10 or so items were very simple. There were green leaves, red earrings, a short brown rod, and even the black crystals that Skrill had previously given him. The silver surface of the table was made using a special alloy. It was incomparably hard and had a high resistance against specific magic experiments. Hence, it was widely used in this area. Currently, the shining, sparkling metallic surface reflected Leyland's troubled expression. These were naturally the numerous high-grade meditation techniques Leyland had forcefully obtained. Though the Twilight Zone had obtained a larger number of complete inheritances from the ancient magi, high-grade meditation techniques weren't anything common. Some unrated guilds only had the simplified versions that had been altered based on incomplete high-grade meditation techniques, which were completely useless to Leyland. There were also a few guilds who had the same high-grade meditation technique as the dense fog forest. However, they only had the first or second levels, and these were slightly modified. Leyland could immediately recognize this. These guilds must have been the Magi guilds that had split up from the original dense fog forest. This was not uncommon. It was not unusual for Magi in the Twilight Zone to split up based on differences in opinion, while still having a good relation with the original guild. This was somewhat similar to a branch of the original guild. Hence, though Leyland had technically destroyed 10 or so guilds, what Leyland actually gathered were only 6 high-grade meditation techniques. Of course, the rate of advancing was much higher here than in the South Coast, but Leyland was still in a bad mood. This was because out of the 6 high-grade meditation techniques, there were 5 that were incomplete. This was not something that could be explained just by the chaos of war. Only after checking some documents regarding this guild did Leyland gather a more reasonable explanation. In ancient times, the inheritance of high-grade meditation techniques was not open to everyone in one go. Only 1 or 2 levels would be passed down at a time, and only after Magi succeeded would they gradually be passed down more. This was to ensure the secrecy of the high-grade inheritances. The other reason was to prevent Magi from seeking instant returns. However, after the fall of the ancient Magi in the final war, there appeared a huge problem, a discontinuity in the passing down of meditation techniques. The higher-ranked Magi had fallen before they could pass down the other portions of their meditation techniques, which had resulted in the Magi of the Twilight Zone being unable to advance further. The level of Morningstar Magus was the bare minimum requirement to participate in the final war, and hence, the high-grade meditation techniques left in the Twilight Zone mostly had 2 or 3 levels, and there was a lack of information on the essential later portions. In ancient times, Rank 2 and Rank 3 Magi were considered to have just finished their apprenticeships, and as such, they were naturally not required to enter the battle. They had survived and passed down their meditation techniques.
However, it wasn't as if there were no surprises. Leyland extended his hand and picked up something like a part of a white bone joint from the table. Though it had an interesting appearance, this was actually a tool used for storing information. Leyland connected his spiritual force to it, and information about a high-grade meditation technique appeared. Ancient symbols appeared at the beginning of the meditation technique, emitting an ancient aura. There was even the sound of a dragon's roar. Dragon King's mystic might. High-grade meditation technique for dragon magi split into 4 levels: infant dragon, young dragon, adult dragon, elder dragon. Leyland slowly read through the content regarding this high-grade meditation technique. In ancient times, Magus was a term that was inclusive of all powerful beings, whether they were of other races, humans, or even high-energy creatures. As long as they possessed intelligence, had strength, and pursued the truth, they could all come under the umbrella of being a Magus. This Dragon King's mystic might was obviously a high-grade meditation technique meant for the dragon race to train in, based on the AI. Chip's estimations, as well as a few illustrations from Dragon King's mystic might, creatures of the dragon race, would accelerate their growth rate if they trained in this high-grade meditation technique. They would develop twice as fast as their peers and would enter the sequence of being a mature dragon earlier. Leyland unhurriedly caressed this bone. This Dragon King's mystic might was what the dense fog forest had in storage. But it was a pity that this was merely a decoration for dense fog forest, as it was comprised of only humans. This was a high-grade meditation that was meant for another race and was unsuitable for the human body. Even warlocks that had the bloodline of dragons could not do this. However, after Leyland discovered this Dragon King's mystic might, it was like he had gained a treasure. Though he could not train this technique either, he could see the traces of a new bloodline in this high-grade meditation technique. Similar to the Chemoian's pupil, the Dragon King's mystic might was a high-grade meditation technique that had very stringent requirements in terms of bloodline. It was probably even more strict than the Chemoian's pupil. This would be of immense help to him in completing the next few parts of Chemoian's pupil. The Chemoian's pupil that Leyland had acquired only had 3 levels and lacked the most important part, which was a description about the morning star realm at the 4th rank. Dragon King's mystic might could be used to make up for this. In addition, the other high-grade meditation techniques had their unique features, which could be used to improve the AI. Chip's database. No matter how different they were high-grade meditation techniques and had to have some similarities. This was what Leyland was going to rely on to complete Chemoian's pupil and sacred flame. Even so, the last few portions of the Dragon King's mystic might are missing. Leyland felt a little regretful. He still wanted to know what was after the 4th level of the Dragon King's mystic might. In ancient tales, after the Elder Dragon were the ancient dragons, top creatures that could contend against great rank 5 magi. And after that, there were the beings that only existed in legends, the immemorial dragons. However, the Dragon King's mystic might lacks content after the 4th level. Leyland looked at the description of the 4th level of the Dragon King's mystic might. The morning star realm for humans is equivalent to the elder dragon in our dragon race. At this position, the power of domain has penetrated into our bones, and our dragon might have also been developed to the limit. In addition, all our spiritual force, magic power, physical strength, and even bloodline will, under influence of some rules, concentrate into point mass. This point mass is what humans call morning star, and what we call a dragon crystal. So, at the morning star realm, it is where magi pathways will become condensed. All creatures of the Magus world at this realm are all the same. Point mass formed from hundreds and thousands of energy all can refine one's strength. Hence, there is a difference like that between heaven and the earth between morning star and rank 3 magi. Leyland gradually understood, in his mind, the AI. Chip constantly recorded information regarding high-grade meditation techniques to fill its database. After goodness knows how long, a prompt from the AI. Chip appeared in Leyland's mind. Beep, recording of 6 high-grade meditation techniques complete. Dragon King's Mystic Might, Abyssal Breath. Completeness of high-grade meditation techniques at 14.7%, beginning to infer actual level of the meditation technique. Following this, the Magi strength chart in Leyland's database experienced some changes. On top of the rank 1 and rank 2 Magi, information regarding rank 3 Magi constantly generated. This was the most accurate information the AI Chip had gathered after doing simulations with multiple high-grade meditation techniques. Beep. Requirements to advance from a rank 2 Magus. Spiritual force reaches the boundary of 200, solidification 100%. Paired with the momentum from the essence of the wisdom tree, probability of advancing to rank 3, 46.9%. I'm a warlock, so I have an added requirement from my blood. However, my bloodline directly came from a giant Chemoyan serpent at the Morning Star, rank 4 level, and completely fits the requirements. It even aids me when my rank is too low. In addition, having almost a 50% chance is not a low percentage. It's no wonder Alistair had made his move and did not hesitate to betray his faction. Leyland touched his chin. The conditions that the AI Chip inferred were based on the most regular Magi that trained in high-grade meditation techniques. This meant he was not included in there. AI Chip, if I use myself as a model, what are my chances of advancing to a rank 3 warlock? Leyland asked silently. Immediately after, a virtual 3D image that looked similar to Leyland was projected in front of him, and large amounts of information streaked through. Chances of host body advancing to rank 3 warlock. 61.72%. This was with the added bonus from the giant Chemoyan serpent bloodline. It was a matured body that had reached the Morning Star realm. To break through rank 2, it was still able to provide an impetus. Looks like breaking through is not an issue. The most important part is to accumulate more spiritual force. Leyland suddenly sighed, looking at his data. Leyland Farlier. Rank 2 Warlock bloodline, giant Chemoyan serpent. Strength 21.1, agility 14.4, vitality 27.9, spiritual force 104.3, magic power. 104 magic power is in synchronization with spiritual force. The injury to his sea of consciousness had only recently healed, and during the time where he had solidified his spiritual force. Rather than improving, it was already very fortunate that he was able to maintain his strength. It was for this reason that the numbers for his spiritual force did not rise. Now, with the repairs to his sea of consciousness completed, his spiritual force could increase once more. Leyland couldn't help but ask, AI Chip, based on my current speed, how long will it take me to be able to meet the requirements to advance? A few minutes passed, and the AI Chip gave an answer. Host body is estimated to reach the limit after 200 years, 12 days, and 13 hours. That long? Leyland's eyes widened. He had increased his lifespan after advancing to become a bloodline warlock, and after rank 2, he could live past 500 years, but 200 years. That was an extremely long period.
Rank 3 Magus, one property of high-grade meditation techniques, was that they tended to get harder to cultivate towards higher cultivation levels. Typically, many Magi would not be able to wait for their meditation techniques to be promoted because they tended to die of old age before their meditation techniques could be cultivated to a higher level. This was why Magi were all passionate about collecting data, since they wanted to increase the pace of the cultivation of their meditation techniques. Leyland let out a long breath. Looks like it is imperative that I use potions or other methods to hasten the pace of the increase in the level of my meditation cultivation. 200 years is way too long. There were many differences between the resources of the Twilight Zone and of the South Coast. Perhaps it would be possible to find spiritual force potions suitable for a rank 2 warlock. Leyland remained confident in the resources that the Twilight Zone possessed. Beep. Rank 3 Magi simulation data has been completed. Completion level, 69.24% the A. I Chip intoned, Behind the data on Rank 2 Magi, a new data was quickly generated. Rank 3 Magi, estimated spiritual force, between 200 to 400. There are 3 stages in the spiritual force: vapor, liquid, and crystal forms. The differences in strength between every rank is estimated to be between 3 to 5 times. The AI chip projected a large paragraph of information before Leyland. Towards the end, the spiritual force span within one rank will be of a large amount and is terrifyingly difficult to achieve, Leyland sighed. An acolyte's spiritual force was within 20 degrees, whereas that of a rank 1 Magus was between 20 and 80. That of a rank 2 Magus between 80 to 200, and upon reaching rank 3, the spiritual force was between 200 to 400. The larger the spiritual force span, the more obvious the differences between the displayed strength. As a result, newly promoted rank 3 Magi and rank 3 Magi with crystallized spiritual force would have an unimaginable difference in strength. After understanding the strength of the rank 3 Magi, Leyland had recognized the formidability of a Morning Star Magi. He had known vaguely that rank 3 Magi would enter a very long transformation period. Should the Magi be promoted successfully, they would have a rank equivalent to that of a Magus from ancient times. That makes sense. Even in ancient times, Morning Star Magi were the rulers of a region and hence could have had a role in the final war. How can it be so easy to level up one's rank? Leyland stroked his chin, only through the continuous concentration of the spiritual force. Can it crystallize and turn into point mass before promoting to a Morning Star Magi? At this moment, the path that a Morning Star Magus took had appeared in its entirety within Leyland's mind. First, the elemental essence conversion. Only when the elemental essence conversion had reached 80% were Magi qualified enough to transform their essence and be promoted to rank 2. Upon promotion to rank 2, all spiritual force would have to have a substance form, appearing as the smallest spiritual force particles. These spiritual force particles, upon approaching rank 3, would gradually be condensed. Through the 3 stages of vapor, liquid, and crystal, they would condense further to form point mass. At this point in time, these Magi would have entered the Morning Star level. The path of a Magus is indeed getting tougher. Merely 80% of elemental essence conversion would easily kill many Magi. Needless to say, the barrier at the end would be an even more difficult task. Leyland exhaled deeply. Thankfully, my path ahead is clear. I only have to follow the path accordingly. AI chip. Set up a long-term mission. Deduce what happened to Chemoyan's pupil and Sacred Flame. Leyland immediately ordered. The AI chip automatically projected 2 progress charts that deduced the mission progress. The progress had not even reached that of 1% and had been increasing incredibly slowly, but at least Leyland could see hope. Amongst these, Chemoyan's pupil was the main meditation technique that Leyland was cultivating, and was the path that he had decided to take a long time ago. And as such, it could not be easily changed. On the other hand, Leyland had gained interest in Sacred Flame, the meditation technique that had its roots from the prophetic Batelli family. Even after having accumulated so many high-grade meditation techniques, from what Leyland could see, the value of Sacred Flame was above that of the other meditation techniques, and could even be on par with that of the Dragon King mystic, might due to its ability to predict the future. This ability was honestly a tad too terrifying. Even though there was the possibility of errors, Leyland still longed for it. Based on the AI chip's deductions and information database on high-grade meditation techniques, one day it will be able to prophesize things. Of course, if I am able to continuously add in new high-grade meditation techniques, the process will be accelerated. Leyland was very clear on this line of reasoning. Boom! Suddenly, a wave of invisible spiritual force passed through numerous barriers and exploded next to Leyland. Is it finally here? Leyland's eyes revealed a hint of a smile, and he immediately flicked his hand. The numerous high-grade meditation techniques had disappeared after a silver flash, and Leyland turned into a phantom before arriving in front of Nature's Alliance's headquarters. Following the directions of a thread of spiritual force, Leyland arrived at a location. This area was originally a wasteland, but in the middle of it now lay a silver-white metallic building. Leyland went up to the door and raised his hands with the intentions to knock. Katja, but before Leyland had transformed his thoughts into action, both steel doors, decorated with floral patterns, had opened automatically and revealed the interior of the building. In the middle of the huge living room sat an old man on a steel chair who smiled gently at Leyland. "Distinguished Leyland, you have indeed been promoted to a rank 2 Magus." The old man stood up and smiled while having given up his seat. This Magus wore burlap clothes and had an average appearance, like that of an ordinary old man, but Leyland had not dared be brazen in front of him. "I'm lucky to have advanced a little further on the path in search of the truth." Leyland appeared extremely humble. From this old man, Leyland could feel that he had a deep, solidified spiritual force that had surpassed his own accumulation. Of course, having a high spiritual force was one thing, but having the actual strength was another. Leyland had, in addition, the strength of his bloodline and a few other hidden trump cards, did not think he would be at a disadvantage, but felt no need to show his abilities. "Ha, please take a seat. You still don't know my name, do you? I'm Logan, the Melhawk Guild's leader." Logan beamed and introduced himself. "Magus Logan, the protector of the Eastern Twilight Zone. I have long heard of your name." Leyland smiled and replied, and at the same time sat down on a chair. Though the chair's exterior still had the glow of steel, it did not have the hardness of one, and instead felt like a sofa that had caved into a certain arch. It comfortably supported Leyland's body. "How's that? This is a steel lifeform I had specially acquired from the external zones." Logan revealed a smile as he observed Leyland's expression. "Not bad." Leyland indifferently evaluated the chair. Though this steel lifeform could not compare to the organisms entirely constructed from the elements of the steel world, this was already very hard to come by. "If I'm not wrong, this entire room is a huge steel lifeform, right? And we are currently speaking to its body." Haha. "Dark steel has an innate gift in concealing its life aura. You are the first person to be able to guess this so quickly." Logan chuckled and hit the tabletop. "Dark steel, come and say hello." Ka-cha, the steel flowed like liquid and formed a rough face on the tabletop. "Hello, Mr. Leyland." At this point, because there was no need for dark steel to hide anymore, Leyland could clearly feel a wave of energy that was of a certain standard. Should it be a magi, it would be of peak rank 1. After conversing for some time, Logan entered the main topic. "Magus Leyland, I think you should be clear about my intentions, no?" At this point in time, the old man's face became more solemn. "Of course," Leyland nodded his head. "In that case, with regards to the matter of Nature's Alliance Guild, violating the rules and exterminating the Dense Fog Forest Guild, and subduing all other subsidiary small-scale guilds, what is your explanation?" Logan glared at Leyland, as if he would make a move on Leyland should he say something not conforming to what Logan expected to hear. "With regards to this." Leyland smiled mildly and took a step back, his fingers crossed, and seemed to be very uneasy. "The dense fog forest first robbed and killed us, then barged into Nature's Alliance's headquarters, and engaged in so much killing that they almost exterminated the Nature's Alliance Guild. As a result, out of self-defense, we naturally retaliated. If I remember correctly, shouldn't this be in accordance with Eastern Twilight Zone's laws for revenge?" Leyland continued smiling and passed the crystal ball with Celine's previous records to Logan. "Furthermore, we have eyewitnesses as well. If you would like to hear the words from one of them, you can leave with me now to meet him." But the dark elven empire is left running amok, and the tide of darkness creatures is approaching. Distinguished Leyland, aren't you being too reckless? If you were to just showcase your abilities, Gus would probably surrender. Upon receiving the crystal ball, Logan did not immediately look into it. But the gloomy clouds on his face had dissipated to a large extent, though his brows were still furrowed. He offended me, the dignity of a rank 2 magi. Leyland squinted his eyes. The atmosphere suddenly became tenser. He almost interrupted my promotion. Only by offering all his blood will it be enough to cleanse his sins. Are these all the excuses that you have? Logan looked right into Leyland's eyes. These are all facts, not excuses, Leyland retorted without restraint. 2 rays of silver glow seemingly collided in midair and produced a crisp sound. Ha ha. All of a sudden, Logan's face revealed a smile, resolving the tension in the atmosphere. Since the opponent started it first and offended you, then I would have nothing else to say. Thank you for your understanding and support. Leyland smiled respectfully. All of these were actually within his calculations. After all, magi were all smart people, especially the more so the older one gets. A medium-scale guild, or a rank 2 magi, this decision did not need deliberation to choose between. 3 years the Magus world was extremely pragmatic. No one would make life difficult for a rank 2 Magus just for a guild that was already exterminated. Given that the demise of Nature's Alliance would benefit quite a few other guilds. If dense fog forest still had survivors who could repeatedly report them and collude with the authorities, there would have been a small bit of hope. However, Leyland had directly uprooted them. Under the massive toxic bile attack on their headquarters, not even a dog had survived. Thus, this matter had been met with little resistance. This was another reason why Leyland had to exterminate the headquarters of dense fog forest, not only to protect the secret of the icy world. Since the way forward had been decided, the other matters were much easier to take care of. Hence, Logan immediately remarked, "In that case, the joint conference will handle this situation appropriately." Dense fog forest's remaining strength should also be handed over to another guild. Don't worry, I'll get Nature's Alliance on the path to becoming a medium-scale guild once I go back. However, will the council members cooperate? Leyland asked. Eastern Twilight Zone's joint conference was held once every 20 years, and the current one had just ended. That's not a problem. The 9 enforcers can make an exception for you, but the matter would still have to be presented at the next joint conference for the sake of formality. Logan waved his hand. That'll work. Leyland immediately returned the favor, saying, "For the upcoming wave of dark creatures, as well as the looming threat of the dark elven empire, I will help with the defense. After all, I'm a part of the human race as well." After being reassured by Leyland, Logan chuckled, the wrinkles on his face smoothing out. "In that case, Leyland, since you're a newly promoted rank 2 Magus, you must have many new perspectives and enlightenments. Now is a good time for us to discuss our viewpoints." Logan beamed, and with a flick of his hands, the steel table folded inwards, and 2 cups of steaming, warm beverage floated up. "I'm extremely honored. I too have many questions pertaining to meditation techniques that I wish to consult Mr. Logan on," Leyland said, smiling and raising his cup. A few hours later, Leyland left Logan's estate. After he left, the exterior of the steel building immediately changed. The 4 thick legs on the steel building stretched out, and the building slowly moved away. Meanwhile, at the side, Leyland's mouth revealed a smile which showed his good mood. This time around, not only did this move help prevent any future troubles, the experiences Magus Logan offered to him were all very useful. Because he had experienced a rapid advancement into a rank 2 Warlock. He had lacked some understanding in regards to rank 2, especially in regards to the path of pursuing the truth. Even though these things did not look very important right now, they would definitely create a lot of inconvenience for him when he attempted to condense the point mass as a rank 3 Magus. Now, there was a chance to remedy this. Moreover, Leyland's depth of knowledge, acquired from the accumulation of information from a different part of the world, greatly surprised Logan. The insight he had gained from this exchange was no less than Leyland's. Ever since Leyland had returned, Nature's Alliance's strength had reached a new peak. Rapidly, all the remaining factions within the dense fog forest was absorbed, and the influence of Nature's Alliance had even spread its net even wider. Regarding these actions, the Joint Conference enforcers turned a blind eye. They eventually even produced a formal letter that openly announced Nature's Alliance's promotion to a medium-scale guild, a move which left many magi dumbfounded. Through the development during this period, Nature's Alliance had broken through from a declining small-scale guild to a peak medium-scale guild. After all, with a rank 2 Magus like Leyland overseeing the guild, it could be considering as a trump card that could surpass most medium-scale guilds. However, Leyland obviously knew Logan's bottom line. The 9 existing large-scale guilds had already stretched the resources of Eastern Twilight Zone to their limits. The remaining resources were insufficient to support the birth of yet another. Leyland had no intentions of vying to make Nature's Alliance a large-scale guild. And hence Nature's Alliance finally stopped growing and began to consolidate their strength, which left many magi heaving a sigh of relief. Honestly, Nature's Alliance's expansion this time was way too aggressive and depended solely on Leyland's powers. The guild's foundations were very unstable. However, after passing this period, everything they took in would have been assimilated, and their abilities would naturally improve as a whole. As the ceremonial guild leader, Celine had been so busy lately that no one knew of her whereabouts. Leyland was far too busy to care about tangible powers. Hence, since Celine was the original guild leader, and as someone who shared an intimate relationship with Leyland, she had obtained a great portion of this power. At this point in time, Celine was full of gratitude for Leyland. Nature's Alliance had once again achieved glory under Celine's leadership, and the extent of its success exceeded that of the past. If her mentors knew about this, they would have been very pleased. Leyland did not care about any of this. After the situation had more or less stabilized, he continued staying in the headquarters of Nature's Alliance and sank into the deciphering of high-grade meditation techniques along with his own cultivation. No matter what resources and materials he required, an instruction to his subordinates was all it took for them to be collected immediately and sent to him. Hence, Leyland became even more reclusive. He could feel that he had improved at a pace that was way too fast, and hence, he needed to reinforce his foundations for a while. As a result, he chose to enter seclusion. Time passed bit by bit without anyone noticing. 3 years later, the borders of Eastern Twilight Zone. At the outskirts of a small town stood a small wooden house. Some animal skins were hung on the walls of the house, which attracted many envious stares. Many townspeople passing by would greet the female owner of the house through the walnut wood fence. "Good morning, Madam Jenny. Good morning, Aunt Via." Currently, Jenny had already grown to become a mature woman, her face revealing more of the charm of a young lady, while she smiled and conversed with the lady at her side. After Aunt Via had left, Jenny looked at the burlap clothes she wore and the basket of wheat bread in her hands. Her face revealed that she was distracted. How time flies. 3 years have passed just like that, Jenny muttered to herself. It must have been 1 or 2 years since she had defected from her family, and it had been another year since she had escaped with Balin to this place and changed her name to Ginny. Initially, when she had decided to elope with Balin and was escaping the Argus family's assassination attempts, they had encountered numerous dangers during their journey. Thankfully, Balin was already a grand knight, and hence they reached the peak of commoners' lives. In addition, Jenny was an acolyte with the knowledge and experience of nobility. After escaping the incessant pursuit of soldiers and the many dangers nature had in store, Jenny finally crossed the border and arrived unharmed. Although this small town was positioned at the border of the eastern twilight zone and was extremely remote, it was considered a safe location, and no one had ever called on them. But, Jenny gritted her teeth, vengeance for her father, her own hatred, was she to just give up on them? After several chaotic memories came to mind, Jenny unknowingly clenched her fists until a voice roused her. "I'm back. Do you want to see what I got?" Balin, who was wearing a hunter's outfit and carrying a bow and arrows, dramatically raised the pot in his hand. "Yellow oil. This is high-grade yellow oil. I exchanged a gray-toothed snake for it. If you spread it on bread, it's something that even royalty might not be able to enjoy. You." Jenny rolled her eyes and led Balin into the house. Though the house was not big, all necessities had been provided through Balin's capabilities. Even though they had to maintain a low profile, they were still living better than commoners. In regards to the lives they were leading now, Balin was naturally very content, but Jenny seemed to have other ideas. After the door was closed shut, Jenny solemnly turned her head around. "We need to leave." "Leave? Why? The environment here is so good." Balin was at a loss. Immediately after, his face tightened. "Could it be that the men from your family have tracked us down?" "No, it's war. The horde of darkness creatures is approaching soon, and the Dark Elven Empire might even commence their attack." Jenny smiled wryly. "You haven't discovered anything after all the constant hunting you've been doing. Now that you mention it, there does seem to be something like this." Balin rubbed his head. "Currently, the number of dark creatures has increased by a large amount. A few days ago, I was chased by a giant wolf that was the size of a hill for almost an entire day." "Now you understand. With regards to the horde of darkness creatures, towns like ours are the least safe. Any small wave of attacks will be able to demolish the town. We have to move closer to the central region or even the capital before we are safe from them. But," Balin scratched his head, "I'm worried about our identities. Although the Argus family has very deep connections within the eastern regions, we are in the northern region, where they have much less influence." "Don't worry, there won't be any problems." Jenny comforted him on the surface, yet she was not too confident on the inside. What she said only applied to regular humans. She had no confidence if the powers of Magi were involved. Even if that was the case, they still needed to move. Jenny was extremely aware of the looming threat of the horde of darkness creatures. Balin was just a grand knight. Even with her might as a level 2 acolyte, they would only be swept away by that force. However, with her drive to survive and encouragement from her hatred, Jenny had advanced into a level 2 acolyte in these 3 years, and could now cast rank 0 spells with some effort. "All right, I'll leave it to you then." Balin smiled boorishly. "However, can't we leave in 2 days? Uncle Via's birthday is approaching. We have to at least congratulate him before setting off." Aunt and Uncle Via were a couple in the small town that had played a huge role in Balin and Jenny's settlement here. Hence, no matter what, Balin had wished to leave the town after the birthday celebration. 2 days is doable. Jenny bit her lips. Large-scale battles often took a long time to prepare, so 2 days was not a significant amount. However, it was regretful that, sometimes, the events in the world have anomalies. For those in northern Twilight Zone, the wheel of fate was beginning to slowly turn. A coincidence on a dark field, a group of cavalry chased after a lone figure. The fleeing figure was a strange sight. He floated a few meters above the ground and had a pair of white translucent wings sprouting from his back. Each flap of these wings propelled him forward a great distance. Behind the winged figure was a group of knights chasing after it. These knights rode on large spiders, each with 8 brown, clawed legs. There were also icy blue stripes on them, and their eyes shone with bloodlust. These were underground winter spiders, the mounts of elite dark elves. The knights riding on these spiders were not humans, but tall, slim creatures with exquisite skin. They had beautiful androgynous contours on their faces, with sharp ears and silver eyes that granted them vision in the dark. Bang! The figure that was escaping in front suddenly turned his head, which revealed his handsome features and pointed ears. Before he started chanting something undecipherable while swinging his arms backwards. 5 crimson-red fireballs were fired out of his palm, but were all dodged by the underground winter spiders, exploding on the ground. Surprisingly, the escaping figure was a dark elf as well. They really think highly of me, huh? Even sending the underground winter spider knights after me. The silhouette continued to escape, but was unable to break away from the knights chasing after him. Not only could these underground winter spiders move at an incredible speed, they could crawl over any terrain, regardless of whether it was in mountains, fields, or even the misty canyons. Their advance could not be stopped. Memphis, how dare you betray the glory of the Dark Lord? I will make you suffer and offer your head as a sacrifice to the matriarch. The knight in charge wore a thin layer of leather armor. The underground winter spider below him was a bit larger than the ones around it, and its upper body was covered with golden stripes. He inhaled deeply, and the underground winter spider increased its speed. Immediately after, he aimed his bow and shot an arrow that flew elegantly, the arrowhead containing a secret, constantly glowing rune, Zoom. A black ray of light emitted out of his hand, piercing through the sky and eventually landing on Memphis' back. Ah. A fiery, red barrier of light appeared behind Memphis' body, but when the arrow came into contact with the shield, the barrier could not even last a second and shattered instantly. The black arrow continued its flight, and with its unknown strength pierced Memphis from behind, protruding out of his chest. Memphis screamed, and the glowing arrow in his back disappeared. He collapsed to the ground, his flowing blood forming a pool of red streaked with silver. Hiss, hiss. The knights in the front surrounded him. Cut off his head. The knight in charge heartlessly said and motioned to his men, resulting in 2 of his men walking up. At this moment, the expression on the knight's face changed. No, fall back, but it was too late. Bang. A strong wave of energy emanated from the body of Memphis, who was suddenly holding a scroll. 2 huge balls of light were shot out, and the 2 approaching knights were burnt to ashes, creating a huge cloud of smoke and dust. After waiting for the aftermath of the explosion to subside, the knight in charge stepped forward with an irritated look on his face. But by that moment, Memphis had already disappeared from the ground. Find him for me, his face contorted in anger. He has been injured by my curse. He will not be able to travel far. Balin aimed with his crossbow, and it cut through the air with a swoosh, hitting the wild boar in front of him. The wild boar squealed loudly, bleeding nonstop, but all Balin did was to pull his crossbow bolt out. Ha ha, Uncle, Balin's present is here. After a fierce battle, Balin smiled slightly while looking at the beast lying on the floor. At this moment, a silhouette appeared from the other side of the battlefield. Who is this? Balin walked up, and the silhouette turned around, revealing a handsome white face. 2 hours later, Jenny was on her way home when she saw the dark elf that Balin brought back. Putting her hand on her forehead, she groaned in despair and shouted, "You idiot. We've already offended the higher-ups and caused enough trouble." Hearing Jenny's complaints, Balin innocently touched his head. I had no choice, seeing how pitiful he looks. Pitiful? Do you know what that is? It's a dark elf. He is a purebred dark elf. Jenny's face was flushed. This may be the border, but if you bring a dark elf, it could bring so much trouble to the town. In these recent 3 years, the dark elven kingdom had frequently caused much insecurity and restlessness among the people. Just with one look at the dark elf's luxurious clothing, Jenny only had one thought. And that was whether or not the dark elf was like her, a member of nobility on the run because of a failed power struggle. Thinking about this connection, Jenny started to break out into a cold sweat. Regarding the cruelness of power struggles, she finally understood and knew that regardless of where this elf hid, in the end, it would just be extending an endless cycle of fleeing and being hunted down. On top of this, her own people would suffer the consequences. Thinking up to here, her eyes flashed with ferocity, but could only sigh when she saw the confused and helpless Balin. Her tone also changed to one that was milder. Whatever happens, we must send him away quickly. I'm sure you don't want to cause Aunt and Uncle Via any more trouble, right? Balin scratched his head. Oh, all right. At Balin's former hunting ground, a bunch of underground winter spider knights surrounded a pit where Memphis the dark elf was concealed. A small underground winter spider that was no bigger than a dog placed one foot into the cave and then clicked at the knights. He said that aside from Memphis, a human scent was found. Human. The expression on the leader's face sank, but then he suddenly started laughing maliciously. No wonder Memphis is well known for peace. He has already been making connections with the humans. He gestured to his men. Follow them. I don't care who dares to protect him. I want to chop their heads off personally as sacrificial offerings. Yes, my lord. The underground winter spider knights responded in order. The relationship between the people of the dark elven kingdom and Twilight Zone was not the best. Crossing the border by a little bit was not such a big issue, but currently, it looked as if a new war was about to break out. Even so, they could still kill a few more men, steal their food, and enslave their women at this point in time. The eyes of many underground winter spider knights flashed red. An hour later, a horse wagon pulled by an old, slow horse. Balin was guiding the horse, while Jenny was lying on a pile of straw with the dark elf that Balin had previously saved. The elf's clothes were cut open at the front, revealing a skinny body. His delicate chest was marred by an arrow wound bordered by a black aura, shaped like a spider and continually expanding. How is he? Balin turned to ask. The external injuries are almost healed, but a curse was cast on him, and I do not have any ideas or methods to cure it. Jenny raised her hands. Although this injury was shocking, what surprised Jenny even more was the elf's vitality, which had allowed him to persevere and survive this long, while suffering from the combination of such a serious injury and curse. The more that I think about it, the more I feel that this is not such a good idea. Judging from the curse, it is obvious that there is an official Magus after this fellow. If we do this, we will definitely infuriate his opponents. Jenny's face turned gloomy. Upon hearing that, Balin could not help but tremble. This was an instinct that had been cultivated over many years. Is an official Magus something like Lord Leyland? Yes. Do you now understand how much trouble you have brought us? Jenny gave Balin an arrogant look. But haven't we already saved him? Balin bitterly laughed. What else can we do now then? All of a sudden, a burst of flames from afar roused Balin from his thoughts. In the dark, vast surroundings, this blaze was getting more and more obvious, almost dyeing the color of the entire sky a fiery red. That is, our town. Balin stopped the horse, a frightened look on his face. What happened? Why would this big fire suddenly appear? Jenny had a bad premonition. At this time, Balin turned the horse without hesitation and headed towards the direction of the fire. Are you crazy? Jenny cried out loud. Uncle Via and the rest are still inside. I want to save them. They can't be saved. Can you calm down a little? Jenny said with an agitated tone. What? How can you be like that? Have you forgotten? Aunt Via has treated you so well all this time, Balin said as he choked on a breath of air. This is not. Sigh. While the two were arguing, the dark elf in the wagon suddenly coughed and woke up. A human, he blurted out in the Twilight Zone language. Jenny's heart went cold. The dark elves spoke a different language from humans, and this elf's proficiency in their language was jarring. In the subterranean world, knowledge was a trademark of nobility, and mastery of foreign languages was prominent amongst them. When she was young, Jenny had been taught the languages of dark elves, gnomes, and even gray dwarves by a private tutor. Learning them despite the physiological differences was simply a nightmare, and yet this dark elf spoke so cleanly that it took Jenny by surprise. "Where is this place?" The dark elf asked as he sat up and looked at the lost Balin. "This is the Twilight Zone. Who are you?" "I'm Memphis, and I need to go now." "I've given you enough trouble already. I'm really sorry." The dark elf named Memphis had an apologetic look on his face. Destiny Memphis struggled and wanted to get up, but immediately the spider made of dark aura on his chest let out a hiss. His face went pale, and he fell back down as large beads of sweat rolled down his face. Shuffling Balin suddenly heard a mild, yet periodic rumble. "It's coming from the town." "Did someone survive?" Balin beamed with delight. In contrast, Memphis' face suddenly changed. "It's the footsteps of the underground winter spiders. They have caught up with us." A short while later, the silhouettes of 5 underground winter spider knights appeared before Balin's eyes. "Memphis, you're really here." "That's great, we actually found you. His head will definitely give us some merit." The knights started chuckling, talking in their language. Jenny only managed to understand a few terms, whereas Balin had a blank face as he could not understand it at all. Very quickly, the blank look on his face turned into one of horror. This was because the knights were sharing the backs of the underground winter spiders with groups of severed human heads, which were still dripping with blood. He could even see a few familiar faces amongst them. Uncle Via, what did you do to them?" Balin's veins popped out with anger, and he unsheathed the crossed sword on his back. "Haha." Although the underground winter spider knights could not understand Balin's reproaching them, they could infer his fury from his body language. One of them used a spear to pick up a head and started taunting Balin at the same time. Another knight held a spear and rushed forward. I'm going to kill all of you." Balin's eyes were bloodshot, and he too rushed forward. Secret technique, cross-star. Balin's life force abruptly exploded and formed an illusory armor around his body. "Kill!" Cross-blade and spear collided, and Balin and the underground winter spider knight both retreated a few steps. Underground winter spider knights were the pinnacle of an army whose regular soldiers each matched human grand knights. Combining their own ability with runes and their mounts, their strength vastly surpassed that of the average grand knight. However, Balin himself was no ordinary grand knight and could fight him evenly. Unfortunately, Balin had to fight not one opponent, but 5. After seeing the life force explode out from Balin's body, a few knights looked at each other, shouted a few words Balin could not understand, and rushed forward. A black ray shot through the sky and landed on the shoulders of an underground winter spider knight, piercing into the knight's shoulder with some difficulty. Jenny stood on the carriage, bow in hand. Her face was calm while she shot arrows non-stop. Naturally, she could see the situation clearly. Under present circumstances, the only way to survive was eliminating this small party. The problem was that they were badly outnumbered, and each of their opponents was stronger than Grand Knights. Exterminating them would not be easy. Jenny smiled bitterly in her heart. As was to be expected, Balin was slowly surrounded by the knights and seemed unable to endure any more attacks. The illusory armor around him began to appear as if it would explode any moment. Creak, creak. One of the spiders, under its rider's commands, leaped past Balin's resistance and arrived before the carriage the black spear pierced forth. And the resulting winds caused Jenny's face to change. Ouch! Nearby, Balin let out a groan. His armor had disintegrated and blood was gushing out from all of his wounds. Buzz, buzz. Suddenly, Jenny felt a strong energy wave explode violently next to her. She turned her head and saw Memphis struggling to open a scroll in his hands. A gray ripple swept out, the ring of light seeming to be a spirit avoiding both Jenny and Balin, as it reached the underground winter spider knights. It was like a halo that bound the knights and their mounts. The knights that had been bound by the halo immediately felt the enormous power they were proud of dissipating. Even their mounts began trembling as if they could not stand under their own weight. A weakening imprint. Retreat! A knight immediately shouted. But at this time, Balin lost all self-restraint. Die, cross-blade. He violently used the last bit of his spiritual energy and executed the killing stance of the cross-sword technique. A blade of light in the shape of a cross mercilessly slashed through the 4 surrounding knights. Their faces became lifeless, and in a few moments they disintegrated along with their mounts. Whoosh! Jenny seized this chance and used a single arrow to pierce through the neck of the last escaping knight. Memphis let out a smile, but abruptly spat out black blood, after which he fainted. Half a day later on the carriage, Jenny looked at the defeated Balin and Memphis beside her and was speechless. Why? Why must we kill? Why must there be war? Balin muttered under his breath, the world having lost all color. This is an answer that I've been looking for, but unfortunately I have not reached a conclusion. Currently, Memphis was using the sap from a green plant to wrap the wounds on his chest. He laughed bitterly. The 2 of you have saved me. I, Memphis, swear upon the honor of the dark royalty that I will repay the 2 of you. Let's not talk about that for now. The conflict you mentioned previously, is that real? Jenny was obviously more concerned about this issue than other matters. It's real. I have suffered from persecution and attempted assassination from others just because I advocated for peace. Memphis' eyes glowed, and his voice sank. What's our plan now? Jenny looked at Balin. I have decided. I must do my best to prevent the war this time around. I don't want to see more people shedding blood. Balin's voice was coarse but held an unquestionable resolve. You're crazy, Jenny was trembling. Based on your ability alone. No, there's still him. Balin pointed to Memphis. I will escort him back to the Dark Elven Empire and try my best to stop the war. Having made that decision, Balin suddenly felt like he was heating up. He ripped open his clothes, revealing a gold coin that had a peculiar exterior. On one side of the coin was a skeleton, whereas on the other side was a lucky bird. The rim of the coin gave off a dim glow. Balin had pierced through the gold coin, run a string through it, and hung it on his neck. Balin caressed the gold coin, his eyes showing signs of even more determination. Mr. Leyland, Master, you support me as well, don't you? Eastern Twilight Zone, Nature's Alliance headquarters. Currently, Nature's Alliance had stabilized its strength as a medium-scale guild and had countless hundreds of acolytes, far from what it was like in the past. Moreover, the increased presence of magi strengthened their defenses greatly. They were now a few ranks higher than before. In the forbidden area in the middle of Nature's Alliance, within a huge laboratory, Leyland blanked out and immediately looked towards the golden crystal in his hands. Currently, the crystal was emitting a faint heat, and the golden light generated from within enshrouded it. A portion of the spiritual force has been received. Leyland suddenly laughed. It looks like Balin has already started walking along with his destined spiritual path. The strength of fate will accumulate in his body. Leyland glanced at the AI. Chip's progress with the recovery of the meditation techniques. Sacred Flame, the high-grade meditation technique that Leyland longed for, the same one that could predict the future, had finally been fully recovered. There were even a few areas that were being constantly improved. On the other hand, Kemoyan's pupil had not advanced at all in the past 3 years, remaining at halfway to completion. Leyland assumed that the lack of high-grade meditation techniques meant that advancing it to the 4th grade was exceedingly difficult. After all, the only one rank 4 technique in his possession could only be cultivated by dragons, while the others had no information that could assist in the progress of Kemoyan's pupil. On the other hand, Sacred Flame had been recovered much earlier, and even went through a few modifications to remove the negative repercussions. It was a pity that the AI Chip only managed to simulate it to the 3rd rank. This meant the technique only went this far, and that left Leyland feeling slightly regretful, since the gears of fate have started to turn. Then I can only continue to scatter more of these seeds so as to anticipate a harvest in the future. Leyland stroked his chin and looked towards the experiment table. The silver-white tabletop had a few peculiar objects on it. Among these items were a black ring, a 5-colored pendant, and a tattered notebook. AI, Chip, begin. Leyland's eyes shot out a blue glow, and he picked the few objects up. Limited AI programming has been completed, inputting data. The AI chip intoned. After a few minutes, Leyland picked up the black ring. A ray of light shot out, and out came the figure of a scholarly-looking Magus. I am the legendary Grand Magus Merlin, you lucky fellow. You will receive my advice and become the Twilight Zone's strongest genius. Leyland's mouth quivered. The Grand Magus figure seemed to have life, as it spoke with charm. These were the limited artificial intelligences that Leyland had been designing. He had the ability to control the programs remotely, which made them very useful. Having been pleased with himself after the adjustments, Leyland placed the few items into an empty bag and walked out of the laboratory. My lord. Along the way, no matter whether they were official magi or acolytes, all of them lowered their heads in respect. Some acolytes would even bow from a distance and quickly walk away. I can't believe that even I would receive such treatment, Leyland abruptly laughed. If high-level magi had not intentionally exercised restraint, the strong radiation that emitted from their bodies would be a type of contagion that could even be lethal to low-level acolytes. As a result, previously in the Abyssal Bone Forest Academy, there were many forbidden areas, which were actually the living areas and experimentation areas of high-level magi. In the past, when Leyland had seen those magi, he would also bow from a distance before quickly avoiding them. But now, it was time for others to do so instead. Dahlon, in a short span of 3 years, Nature's Alliance had cemented its status as a medium-scale guild. After absorbing dense fog forest's remains, it had even managed to become a peak medium-scale guild. All of these achievements had been largely attributed to Leyland's contributions, a fact that went undisputed. Even if he did nothing personally, the mere presence of a rank 2 Magus would eliminate most of the Alliance's troubles. Hence, the faith that he commanded from members of Nature's Alliance had been increasing day by day up to a point of reverence, even deification. Additionally, a lot of magi had joined during this period of large-scale recruitment. Although Celine's strength as a rank 1 Magus afforded her some bit of status, there was no longer any influences that she could have. This meant that even if Leyland intended to take away her nominal position as the guild leader, he needed but to ask. Passing through layers of glowing spell formations, Leyland ended up at a purple villa. My lord, Celine and Iron respectfully bowed. MMM. Leyland nodded and directly asked, has anything happened recently? The guild's development has been very smooth. Currently, our influence has expanded to the vicinity of the Ural mountain plains. 2 local small-scale guilds have also expressed their desire to subordinate themselves to us. Iron took the lead and bowed, while reporting to Leyland. A peak rank 1 Magus, Leyland's strongest military force, Iron ranked highly within Nature's Alliance, where he specialized in the guild's expansion. What about the approaching horde of darkness creatures and the Dark Elven Empire? Leyland asked. Reports of abnormal activity of the darkness creatures are starting to come in. In addition, the warmongering faction in the Dark Elven Empire successfully staged a coup, eliminating all influence of the pro-peace faction. They've mobilized the entire army and are ready to attack any day now. Wars were not uncommon in the subterranean world, but they rarely coincided with the attacks of the horde of darkness creatures. This was so rare, in fact, that even a peak rank 1 Magus like Iron had only encountered such a situation once in his lifetime. That period had seen the loss of many magi and numerous large-scale guilds. It had come to be known as the subterranean world's great power reshuffle, an event that destabilized. The world of magi would obviously be a long period of suffering for the commoners. From the looks of it, a big war is inevitable. Leyland sighed lightly. A war between two intelligent species wouldn't be quick to occur. It would be prefaced by a long period of strategy and preparation, with very little surprise attacks occurring. High-ranking magi had started keeping tabs on their opponents as early as 3 years ago, and their preparations had begun even further back. However, precisely because of this long preparatory phase, any and all strategies tended to be useless. The war would devolve into a contest of information gathering and military might. "Have we made any moves yet?" Leyland looked at Celine. Recently, this woman had become much more beautiful. It was as if the power she'd gained made her glow more than she already did. Power was an elixir to men. This was no less true for women as well. It was a pity that, although these women were as beautiful as roses, every rose has its thorns. To conquer them was not a simple task. Were he on Earth, Leyland would naturally not think like this, but the Magus world was different. Dominance, status, everything came from his own power, and he was not in the least bit concerned that Celine would one day surpass him. Forget the commoners' war for now. The Joint Conference has commissioned a war council headed by the 9 enforcers. It issued a formal request for your assistance. Celine arranged her hair. This revealed a translucent earring inlaid with a glowing red ruby. The request was a result of Leyland's agreement with Logan. In exchange for his participation in the war, Nature's Alliance had been allowed to expand unchecked. "Where have they stationed me?" Leyland asked with interest as he sat on a reclining chair. He raised up a crystal goblet, the fresh red wine within as thick as blood. "Dahlon City. A large number of the magi who responded to the call have gathered there. Of course, Duke Fendix and the royal military have been stationed there as well. Dahlon." Leyland raised his glass, and a map of Eastern Twilight Zone appeared within his mind. "They've retreated too far. That's basically giving up the borderlands. Most of the commoners have already been evacuated." Celine smiled wryly. "But for some areas, it's beyond our control." As a Magus, Celine generally thought of problems purely based on how they affected her. But now that this matter concerned everyone, she exhibited the sympathetic nature of a woman. Immediately, the sympathy turned into worry. The War Council intends to use Dahlon, Wakeshire, and Sador to form a tripartite defense that makes full use of our geographical advantages. When the war begins, my lord, you will have to face the military might of the Dark Elven Empire, including many of their matriarchs. The Dark Elven Empire was still a matriarchal society, and was more a united kingdom made of numerous smaller clans than anything else. The matriarchs of the smaller clans were at least as strong as official magi. The ones Celine referred to were the matriarchs of the larger clans, existences that rivaled rank 2 magi in might. Dark elves were naturally gifted with extraordinary strength, something which made the average elf much more powerful than the average human. Were it not for their low fertility, they would have conquered the Twilight Zone long ago. Celine's face was full of worry. After all, she was very clear that the powers she had came from Leyland. Should anything befall him, even if Nature's Alliance didn't crumble, it would fall dramatically in power. "Don't worry, I have confidence." Leyland let out a smile. That he had decided to go forward meant he was amply prepared for anything that he might come across. At the very least, his personal safety wasn't an issue. After all, even in a war as large in scale as this one, rank 2 magi rarely fell. Furthermore, he was not there to fight but to observe. The moment something was amiss, he would flee. Which matriarch would dare sacrifice herself to prevent his escape? Leyland had already recovered his strength as a rank 2 warlock, even advancing in some areas. He was confident that, as long as he didn't meet an old freak that rivaled rank 3 magi, nothing could stop him. However, thinking up to this point, Leyland felt a bit depressed. In a world of beings with extraordinary abilities, large-scale wars generally depended on the strength of the higher-ups. Wouldn't the humans turtling up mean that even his monstrous strength would not be able to turn the tide of this war? Neither Selline nor Iron was qualified to know of this. Perhaps only rank 2 magi would be able to see the situation more clearly. No matter what, I need to go and have a look. If I were to pass the completed techniques to the acolytes of Nature's Alliance, it would arouse suspicion. Furthermore, the shifting landscape of war could hold good opportunities for me, Leyland considered. Upon seeing Leyland deep in thought, Iron immediately took his leave. Selline was a little disappointed and just curtsied. Just as she turned to leave, Leyland grinned. "Selline, don't go just yet." Having heard that, Selline's face revealed a charming smile. Dahlon City was a military town along the eastern Twilight Zone's border. The town was built purely of black granite, which made it look like a huge fort from afar. Currently, militia lined the entrance of the town, and soldiers and fleets of carriages crossed the gates occasionally. Flags bearing the royal family's crest were everywhere, and the silhouettes of knights leading small patrol teams were scattered around. The entrance was guarded by official magi in gray robes, and stringent checks were performed on everyone. Dahlon City originally supported 100,000 residents. Most of its current population, however, comprised of soldiers. Now that the Joint Conference had commissioned a war council, the royals they backed could only execute their battle plans. All of Dahlon City was preparing for war and had begun wartime operations. The center of the city was occupied by the grandest villa in town. However, this villa was not for royalty. It was meant, instead, for distinguished magi. Numerous magi, robed in all colors, could be seen on premises. They'd even set up a large spell formation for defense. Some of the magi patrolling the city walls would occasionally cast spells on the wall to strengthen it. The atmosphere here is so stifling. A rank 3 acolyte, wearing a gray acolyte robe, walked along a deserted road and intermittently glanced at both sides of the street. Passing soldiers would bow to this mighty magician. With one foot already in the grave, how can I still be considered a magician? Aaron smiled wryly. This acolyte was among the first group of people Leyland had met when he was transported here. Back then, Aaron was among the party of 3 acolytes and 2 grand knights that Leyland had saved in the woody wastelands. As recompense, Leyland had scanned their souls, which resulted in them losing a lot of things. Aaron sighed deeply. During his previous reckless foray into the woody wastelands, he had luckily obtained biomaterials worth a lot of magic crystals. Still, he felt like something was amiss, although he could not put a finger on it. What terrified him further was that, after his return, he found out that his aptitude had dropped a grade. Aaron and the other acolytes had been lucky to survive Leyland's reckless scanning of their soul. However, his random tampering of their memories had grave consequences. The development of magicians depended largely on their aptitude. Aaron's original aptitude was not astounding, a mere grade 3. When it fell to grade 2, he felt as if the world began to crumble down on him. He still remembered the regret and disappointment in his mentor's eyes after the examination. As he said, perhaps an abnormal being attacked you, leading to the demotion of your aptitude. It might never be reversed. Pity, what a pity. Anya with the drop in his aptitude, he turned from an acolyte with a bit of hope into a good-for-nothing. After seeing Aaron's state, his mentor did not beat around the bush, telling him directly that he no longer had the qualifications to train in a high-grade meditation technique. Some high-grade meditation techniques had stringent requirements for those cultivating them, and currently, Aaron did not qualify to cultivate his. It's much more difficult to advance to an official Magus using the simplified version of the high-grade meditation technique. Doesn't this amount to completely giving up on me? And then there's her. Aaron lowered his head, fingernails digging into flesh. After finding out that his aptitude had lowered and that he could not train in the high-grade meditation technique anymore, his relatives and former friends had shunned him. Even his fiancée had abandoned him. The memory of her firmly leaning into another's embrace as she looked at Aaron in disdain left him feeling like his chest would burst into flames. What infuriated him further, even driving him into the pits of despair, was that his enemies in the guild had taken the opportunity to beat him up. There were even traces of evidence showing that woman pulling strings in the background for him to be dispatched to a place like this. Dalan City was at the front lines of the war. Official Magi might be able to retreat calmly if the city fell, but level 3 acolytes like him had no chance. In wartime, the army would be much more willing to give up on cannon fodder like him than on those of higher rank. Historically, an intense war like this would spell doom for over half the acolytes. Aaron found himself feeling numb. He had to drag his body to the city gate. Level 3 acolyte Aaron, reporting for duty, he said, trying his best to look more alert. The Magus at his post nodded, neither finding anything strange nor getting mad. He'd seen numerous acolytes who were dumped here. With no backing, this fellow wouldn't live past a month, so why would he grow angry at a walking corpse? Your mission is to maintain this detection spell formation. I've already adjusted it. White dots are regular people, while red dots are acolytes and knights. The purple dots are official magi. Is that understood? Yes, Aaron nodded. Suddenly, the spell formation rumbled and produced a loud bang, cracking apart at the edges. A black ray of light exploded forth. And what does black mean? Aaron asked, dumbfounded. Rank 2. A powerful existence that is at rank 2 or above that. The Magus answered in a daze and then snapped out of it. Quick! Sound the alarm! Not far away, a black dot expanded in the sky, gradually forming a human figure. Watching the city gates where there was an uproar, Leyland shook his head slightly. Looks like there's been a misunderstanding. He ceased advancing and silently waited. Minutes later, 2 streaks of similarly powerful energy undulations burst out from Dalan City, and 2 figures transformed into rays of light, darting in front of Leyland. These were 2 rank 2 magi, 1 male and 1 female. The man, in red robes with silver patterns embroidered on, laughed heartily as he greeted, Sir Leyland. It's great that you were able to get here in time. The female Magus merely stood aside and smiled, seemingly leaving the situation to her counterpart. It's my honor to meet you, Sir Fendix. Leyland bowed while smiling gently. In these 3 years, it was not as if Leyland had done nothing. At least he had gotten familiar with a few rank 2 magi in the east. This rank 2 Magus was a leader of a large-scale guild. Duke Fendix was one of his descendants. Come. If there's anything else, let's talk about it after we get back. Fendix looked at the uproar around them and laughed towards Leyland, then slowly descended. Leyland and the female Magus followed behind him. It's a rank 2 lord. Quick bow. Leave alone ordinary soldiers. Even high-ranking military officers and nobles knelt in front of him, while the official Magus from before respectfully bowed to his waist. Aaron quickly bowed as well, and then raised his head, confused. He secretly glanced at the young person in the middle. I seem to have seen that lord before somewhere, but I don't remember where. Just as Aaron's gaze swept over him, the Magus seemed to sense it, and a pair of black pupils flitted over. All of a sudden, a surge of darkness and shadows surrounded Aaron, causing him to retreat a few steps, feeling suffocated. Aaron was so afraid he broke out into a cold sweat and quickly lowered his head, not daring to raise it. It's actually him. I didn't expect us to meet here. In contrast, a grin appeared on Leyland's face. Strictly speaking, all that he knew about Twilight Zone had originated from this acolyte's memories. To be able to meet again, he was considered quite lucky. "I'll choose you first, then." The notion of a twisted delight seemed to rise in Leyland. This thought flashed past, but Leyland's expression remained unchanged as he descended to the mansion at the center with the other two rank 2 magi. The interior decoration was not bad, and it looked to be the residence of some nobility or even mayor of the city. Of course, it had now been taken over. The 3 magi entered the hall and took a seat, a few acolytes bringing drinks and some fruits, and then carefully making their way out. The main forces of the dark elves have reached the border. They seem to be very determined this time and have even dispatched the matriarchs of several ancient families. "Looks like we'll be under immense pressure this time." Fendix looked grim but smiled at Leyland. "Of course, with Sir Leyland here, we'll have even more hope. As a human, I naturally can't shirk my responsibilities." While Leyland said this solemnly on the surface, he was meanwhile thinking about retreating the moment the situation wasn't in his favor. Though he didn't mind helping human beings occupy more land for the sake of survival, this was only if this would not harm his own interests. If not, there was nothing to consider. Of course, this was also how many other high-ranked magi thought. Even if the War Council was aware of this fact, there was little they could do. Meanwhile, Fendix was still speaking. Battles between humans, as well as the regular dark elves and beast waves, are usually handed to the Duke to settle. Underground winter spider knights and dark elf magi, as well as powerful darkness creatures, will require magi to act. And there is but one reason for our existence, which is to prevent the matriarchs of the dark elves and the emperor of the darkness creatures from meddling. Leyland nodded. The powers of rank 2 magi were good at suppression and deterrence. After all, if a rank 2 existence let go of all their inhibitions, even the dark elven empire would not be unharmed. By the way, why is the dark elven empire so confident this time? Leyland's eyes flashed, and he asked. Hearing this, Fendix and the female Magus exchanged glances and smiled wryly. "This is supposed to be top secret, but Leyland, you're a rank 2 Magus as well. You've also joined up with us, so there's nothing left to hesitate about." Fendix set up a soundproof boundary. The protector of the entirety of our Twilight Zone, the person who has become a rank 3 Magus, does not have much time left. The limit of the lifespan of a rank 3 Magus is 1,000 years. Only Morning Star Magi can break through this limit. Ever since he started protecting this region, it has been over 900 years. Leyland went silent for a while. Then he asked, "In other words, this war is but a probe." The Dark Elves must have received some information from their end and started probing, but now. Fendix forced a smile. "All I can say is that Twilight Zone is not allowed to fall back." Leyland's heart fell. It looked like this rank 3 Magus was not in a good condition. Under these circumstances, the Dark Elves' probing would likely become an invasion on a large scale, perhaps even threatening the existence of humans. Something flashed in his mind, and he suddenly thought of Balin. Chaos and suffering will give birth to the child of destiny. Looks like this is the overture to troubled times. With Leyland's silence, the hall was filled with a tense atmosphere. "All right, let's not talk about these. Shall we prepare a grand welcoming banquet? We could use this opportunity and let those magi meet you." Seeing that the atmosphere seemed to have frozen, the rank 2 female Magus smiled slightly and suggested. "No, there's no need. Let me rest for a while and then prepare a few rank 2 spells." Leyland did not have the slightest interest in these customs. That's fine. Magi were generally antisocial, and this was even more so for higher-ranked magi. Fendix and the others did not take it to heart. Central Twilight Zone. This was the core of Twilight Zone, and where there was the largest population. Caravans passed by the routes frequently and were bustling with life. In an unknown area deep in the Earth's crust, a green ray of light illuminated a room. Bathed in the green light was a withered old man. His body was covered with wrinkles, and his eyes had sunk so deep into his skull that he seemed like a dead man walking. A large, bizarre flower had tendrils wrapped around his back. Its densely packed, sizable leaves and branches were a dark green that made them seem fat and juicy. And many of its feelers hung low, extending deep underground to an unknown destination. The stolon penetrated the man's flesh as if taking root there, the man's eyes shining as the roots swelled, channeling a great amount of plant matter into him. A black ray shot out from the back of the old man's hand, projecting a totem in the form of a large spider. My old friend, I can sense your feebleness. The aura of life is constantly waning from your body, and you can't even reject my life absorption much longer. This was the voice of a young lady. It was pleasant to listen to, and even a little bewitching. Anya, the ruler of the dark elven empire, the most respected matriarch of the ancient clan. The old man slowly called out this woman's identity, and immediately after, an absolute formidable energy undulation exploded from behind the old man. You can't stop me. The woman in the totem imprint sighed. Serendipity snap, space seemed to freeze for a moment, but then it seemed like nothing had happened. The black spider totems began to dissipate slowly, and Anya's voice sounded out. You've grown old already, bang. The black imprints dissolved into light. There were fewer stalks on his back now, and milky white sap flowed out of his injuries. When the old man raised his head once again, he seemed older. Patches of gray had begun to appear on his skin. Has this body's vitality been taxed to its limit? The old man looked at the spots on his body and couldn't help but laugh bitterly, his eyes dull and lifeless. Time. The old man said with a long sigh that instantly swept away the rays of light. The cave turned dark once more. Aaron had returned to his room. The last rays of twilight revealed a mix of rotting wooden boards and moldy corners. This stinky room was the luxury he was awarded sole residence in. This dilapidated room showed how much he was valued, yet at this time he could not bring himself to care about it. His mind was occupied with his earlier encounter, patrol. Detection spell formation, the youth with black eyes. Memories flitted across his mind. I've definitely seen him before, but why can't I remember where? He was trying hard to recall. Suddenly, he covered his face and started screaming, veins popping out at his temples. The pain caused him to black out. His screams permeated the room until he returned to his senses a few moments later, finding himself on the ground. Hot sweat rolled down Aaron's face as he gasped. Again and again, this disease from my adventure in the wastelands is wasting away my spiritual force. Bang. At that moment, as if unable to withstand his frustration, a piece of the floor rose up. A black gleam immediately caught Aaron's attention. What is this? Curiosity piqued. He dug out the black object and placed it on his palm. It was a ring with ancient writings on it, one whose surface was coated in black. Aaron's heart skipped a beat. A ring. He twisted it around. It's still giving off faint energy waves. Is it a magic artifact? Magical artifacts, regardless of size and grade, will save your life on the battlefield. As his thoughts turned towards that direction, Aaron couldn't help breathing heavily. All of a sudden, he felt a surging pain from his hand, a prick which caused him to shout and almost throw the ring to the ground. What's this? Aaron looked at his forefinger, stunned, as blood dripped onto the ring from the punctured skin. A small thorn could be seen on the edge of the black ring, which was what had hurt him just now. Zew. The blood drop was immediately absorbed like water on a sponge. The black ring flashed before turning gray. Simultaneously, the energy waves it was previously giving off vanished, and the ring seemed to lose all power, now just an ordinary object. Is it the binding ceremony? In myths, Aaron scratched his head with uncertainty. Although Aaron did not know much about magic artifacts, he was aware that some high-grade magic artifacts that were extremely rare required a ceremony to bind them to oneself. And the catalyst to begin these ceremonies was blood. Ha ha ha, kid, you're right. At this moment, a voice sounded in Aaron's head. Who is it? Who's there? The sudden voice bewildered Aaron, and he began to look around. He could see no one. I'm in the palm of your hand, replied an aged voice. You are the ring. Aaron's eyes suddenly widened. Kid, how about we make a deal? The old man laughed heartily. No, I will not make any deals with you, nor will I sell my soul to you. Aaron said firmly. Magi were not reclusive people. Aaron had heard stories about ancient beings and exotic creatures that made deals with humans, toying with them and harvesting their spirits. Really? You don't want to restore your aptitude anymore. The old man's laugh was sinister. Restore my aptitude. Aaron's heartbeat quickened. I've grasped the mysteries of the soul. If your aptitude had been this low originally, it would have been difficult to increase it. But it's still possible to reverse the effects of the damage to your soul, the old man explained. Who are you exactly? Why would you help me? Aaron asked, reining his emotions in. I am the ancient legendary Magus, Merlin. Memory fragment. The old man paused, causing Aaron to slip. Memory fragment. Yes, my physical body has long since decayed, but this fragment has remained here, stuck in this ring. The old man seemed to be reminiscing. As for why I'm helping you, I told you before. I want something in return. What do you want? Although Aaron was desperate for a cure to his problem, he was still alert and vigilant. Don't worry, you're someone destined for death. How much can I really ask of you? I'm not a devil that is here to collect your soul, Merlin chuckled. I need you to gather my remaining fragments. And in return, not only will I cure your disease, I'll even pass on a complete high-grade meditation technique to you and help you advance to become an official Magus. High-grade meditation technique, an official Magus. Aaron was delighted, but this was immediately followed by piercing agony. Originally, he had hopes of achieving all these, but now, your remaining fragments, what do you mean? I'd originally made many magic equipments into which I'd placed fragments of my spirit. I'd been expecting big misfortune and prepared them to tide it over. You need to help me find the remaining fragments of my spirit. Every artifact you find will be of great help to us, Merlin reassured Aaron upon noticing his hesitation. Besides, the current you is too weak to help me, so I'll also help you increase your strength as much as possible. What are you trying to do? Do you intend to resurrect yourself? Aaron guessed. Hee. The rules of death aren't something a trifling Magus like me can interfere with. I'm only a remnant filled with unfulfilled desires, and I'm unwilling to remain cooped up in a ring forever. I need your help to find my remaining fragments. Do this one thing for me, and we will be even. I swear on my own spirit. You don't need to swear, I will help you, Aaron fiercely said. You're right. What have you to gain from fooling a dead man like me? For that woman to abandon me for her own pleasure, I will not stand for it, Aaron said with red eyes. Ha ha. All right, even if I'm a mere fragment, I still possess a huge amount of knowledge. All you need is that to become Twilight Zone's premier genius. Then you can easily rise above the others once again. Magus Merlin laughed heartily in Aaron's head. Then, let's summon the Trial's Eye and sign a contract. The fury on Aaron's face disappeared, and he calmly stated this condition. Of course, the old man said after a brief period of silence. Aaron's eyes flashed, and he immediately summoned the Trial's Eye hologram as a witness, under the witness of the Trial's Eye. In the room, the voices of two people swearing an oath could be heard. It's done. On the other side, Leyland, who was in the laboratory, laughed, looked at his own body, bound by Trial's Eye, and held a pitcher with the solution of a nefarious filthbird's feathers. That thing was sent on purpose by the ring. Merlin was just a limited AI, but it could fool the inexperienced Aaron. Furthermore, at critical moments, Leyland could control him from afar. All in all, this was just a counterfeit of a certain ring and grandfather. With what I've given you, how will you affect the wind and waves of Twilight Zone? I'm looking forward to it. Leyland chuckled, and an intense light flashed in his eyes. As a nervous atmosphere permeated Dalan City, all the commoners were evacuated. Within days, many darkness creatures surrounded it, and among them could be seen the faint silhouettes of people. Sir Leyland, Sir Fendix has invited you to the city wall. A middle-aged man wearing golden armor respectfully informed Leyland. This middle-aged man was Duke Fendix, the commander of the army. The Fendix family had consecrated numerous official magi, many of whom were famous. Furthermore, this included 2 of Fendix's own descendants. But in front of Leyland, they were required to lower their heads like a commoner in the presence of a noble. Got it. Leyland said, as he slowly closed the big book in his hand and arrived at the city wall. Because this was the first attack, not only were there numerous soldiers and generals, but magi were also present to watch. Sir Leyland. Fendix greeted Leyland, floating in midair. Leyland laughed as he flew up to join him. The two looked at a black line at the difference that was rushing at them like a tide. Magnificent, is it not? The beginning stages of the war would be fought by cannon fodder. These creatures did not possess much strength, and Fendix's expression did not even change. Magnificent indeed. Leyland could not help but say lightly as he looked beyond the wall. There were hundreds of thousands of darkness creatures down below. He had not expected so many darkness creatures to be here, and this number was only that of those in the area. The total number of darkness creatures in all the armies was definitely astronomical. Darkness creatures, human beings, and the other species, this land cannot support all of us. Thus, every once in a while, all these races go to war. A female rank 2 Magus said softly at the side. Among all the races, war and alliance both have occurred countless times since long ago. This war will have no winners and losers. Only after all groups have used up nearly all their resources, supplies, and soldiers, only then can the war end.